Hello, neighbor. I'm Robert Burns, and it is such a thrill to be back with you. And what we're going to be doing in a two-part segment, we are going to be bringing you up to speed on someone I've not reported on for a little while, and that would be none other than Louisiana Inspector General Stephen Street. And trust me, the segment you're going to see as we bring you up to speed on him, you are going to want to be glued in watching that update segment. But in order to do that, I need to first go back and get you some highlight reels from one of the very first interviewees that we ever did in Sound Off, Louisiana. And it's been almost 3 years ago, but and he was a key reason that Sound Off Louisiana was formed, to be blunt with you. His name is Corey Delahousse. Now, very briefly, Corey served to come into Livingston Parish in the aftermath of Hurricane Gustav to assist them with paperwork problems they were having, and basically ended up identifying $58 million in fraudulent invoices submitted to FEMA, all of which got denied by FEMA and then subsequently through an appeal hearing in Washington that lasted 5 days. And Corey found himself being prosecuted for an allegation that he submitted $6,000 of invoices for his time when they say he was doing other things out of over $2 million in total invoices that he submitted. Now that gave you a quick background. We're going to break away. We're going to show you highlights of that. It will not take but about 13 and a half minutes or so. It'll lay the foundation for what we're going to present to you in our next segment, which will be an update on Stephen Street. Thank you so much. We're going to break away and give you a roll back in time from June of 2015 when we interviewed Corey Delahousse. I think you'll find it very intriguing. Thank you so much. We look forward to bringing you segment 2 on an update of Stephen Street. Thank you again.
To find out what permits were needed and if mitigation was going to be required. So, I was kind of appalled that when I first began working on this project, much to my surprise, Livingston Parish had acquired very few permits through the Corps of Engineers.
Okay.
And I would think a parish who has a lot of wetlands and a lot of low-lying areas and typically floods, I would think that at some point in time someone would have made an effort to put a plan in place to secure permits on behalf of the parish and to, for one, safeguard the parish and two, safeguard the public.
So basically your efforts would try to clean up, if you will, paperwork problems with regard to lack of permitting issues with the Army Corps of Engineers?
Right, well, because without those permits, it would be, without having the proper permits in place, then it is virtually impossible for FEMA to turn around and fund a project that is in violation of federal law.
I understand. So you were actually coming in trying to assist the parish with conforming with federal law in order that they could qualify for reimbursement.
That is correct.
All right.
So by the time I finally met with the FBI, I met with them in November of 2010, a year later.
Okay.
But during that time, I had met with every agency in the state and federal agency, EPA, Corps of Engineers, and in a sense, no one wanted to elevate this to a civil level, saying that, oh, we don't want to take the case. I mean, for instance, Stephen Street's office denied to even look at the claims of fraud. And the EPA has a criminal investigation division. And at that time in November of 2010, the EPA and the FBI approached me and said, it's our understanding that you have evidence and information pertaining to these canals and the debris. We discussed the matters. I was offered an opportunity to be an informant. Thought long and hard about it. Once I made my decision, I began to unload what I had.
Okay. And I assume that at some point your identity kind of got out there, if you will, as being, I guess, the single party that would be, rightly or wrongly, held most responsible for a whole bunch of contractors not getting paid, and thereby had a target on your back. And thereafter, the Inspector General's office, as I understand it, they came in to start doing an investigation on you, correct?
Well, I mean, their investigation was prompted on several things. First, it was political. This entire Gustav debris matter is political. Okay. I don't care how you shake a stick at it. You call a spade, and this is political. For the district attorney to have 208 contractors working on a project and you target me, the one guy who's a whistleblower, is enough proof that this is political.
Okay.
Majority of the meetings that I had with regard to the illegal activities associated with the debris, I had met in private in some meetings with Blaine Honeycutt, the assistant district attorney under Scott Perilou, and advised him repeatedly that, we're not going to get money for this because it was done illegally.
Okay.
I was told repeatedly, and the conversations were recorded, just leave it alone, look the other way, keep your mouth shut. And one heated conversation in front of the gravity drainage district, Blaine Honeycutt tells me I need to choose a side. Either you're with us or you're against us.
Ah.
So on July 25th, 2013, Sheriff's Department shows up with a SWAT team knocking on my door. We're laying in bed at 6 o'clock in the morning, and I walk outside, guns drawn on me, as if I was some kind of drug lord. They raid my house, have my kids, pull my kids out of bed, which are sleeping. My daughter was 10 years old, my son was 7. They were scared. My wife was in her nightgown.
Sure.
This was one of those moments where you think this could not be happening to me.
I understand.
And Greg Ferries walks up in his starched cowboy blue jeans and his cowboy boots and tells me, like he's John Wayne, that we could do this the easy way or the hard way. And something else we found out through the course of this investigation, the Inspector General's office had that search warrant for over a week. Their intention was to raid my house the week before.
But they postponed, knowing that you were on the agenda for.
That's correct.
I got you.
That is correct. So this is all, yet again, another political ploy by Scott Perilou's office, Chris Moody, the attorney for Livingston Parish.
But let me ask you this: at the time that Mr. Perilou was actively prosecuting this, and during all this time, was he aware that you were an FBI informant?
Yeah, in November, when under oath, I testified that I was a former FBI informant on this case. And that's how it got out. And then shortly, it was literally within a matter of a couple of days, Mr. Perilou announced that I was a target of an investigation by his office.
Let me ask you this. I recall one news interview in which Mr. Perilou was asked about your role as an FBI informant. And I'd like for our viewing audience to, correct me if I'm wrong, but it appeared to me like he kind of mocked the fact that you were an FBI informant. Am I correct?
Well, yeah, and it depends. I mean, he's had so many interviews about me. I think for one, it's obvious I'm probably the most hated human in his life. And maybe it's because I interfered with him getting kickbacks, but nonetheless, he's done several interviews with regard to my status as an FBI informant. When it was obviously clear and very apparent from our trial last year in Washington, D.C., where I worked for FEMA, we went for arbitration, and it was announced in a trial that I was the FBI informant and I was currently working for the federal government. I mean, there's no deniability that is part of court records.
Well, and what I'd like to do is I'd like to break away for just a moment and let's watch Mr. Perilou's response to the inquiry of whether Mr. Delahousse was in fact an FBI informant. We'll be right back with you.
What do you say, though? I mean, what about the charge or the claim that Mr. Delahousse is some kind of a federal informant himself?
Yeah, I've read about that, and I've actually talked to the U.S. Attorney's Office about it and the FBI about it. And I'd say this, Ken. What is defined as an informant, I'm not really sure. If you or I or someone, I believe, calls the FBI, they have somebody on duty at all times. If you call them and say, I have information about a crime, and it could be a federal crime, I think they'll speak to you, and they may speak to you several times. Does that make you an informant? I don't know.
Would you say that it would be fair to characterize that Mr. Perilou trivialized your role as an FBI informant, or how would you react to the clip that was just aired?
Well, I think he does trivialize it a lot, and for me, it's one of those things that it proves that this is personal. But I've never in my life seen somebody have total disregard for somebody who tried to do what was right on behalf of the public. Watching that video just shows his arrogance. And
we're going to provide our audience, beyond just this video, we're going to provide you with a little link you can click on that will have a little bit of more added detail. And one of the things we're going to provide in there is an excerpt from that FEMA hearing that you referenced. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I recall reading from that transcript that a FEMA attorney went out of her way to say Mr. Delahousse is a confirmed FBI informant. And she went on to say, and I think it is reprehensible, that the material related to what Mr. Delahousie is under investigation for is even being brought into this matter. Everyone knows that he was a whistleblower, that he came in to try to clean up the mess, and so for that, the Livingston Parish is going after him. Now, I'm very close to a verbatim quote of what that attorney said, and we're going to provide you with that expert so you can actually see the highlighted text of that. I have to say, Mr. Perilou attempted to get an indictment, and by the way, I'm correct on that, right? He attempted to get an indictment, I believe that was December of 2013, in which that effort failed.
Right.
Am I correct? He failed to get an indictment, and that's when she made her commentary about that this was a vendetta to go after him, and that it had no business being him. And by the way, just so the viewing audience can be clear, what happened is FEMA denied, as we mentioned earlier, denied some $58 million in cost reimbursements. The state of Louisiana and Livingston Parish appealed that denial, and what Mr. Delahousie has been referencing has been the appeal hearing. He has referred to it as a trial, but it was a 3-judge panel who made the decision of the appeal of the denial of that, and that was upheld, was it not?
Right.
It was, so in December of 2013, Mr. Perilou failed to get an indictment. What happened after that?
He got on television the very next day and said, I don't care what the grand jury does, I'm moving forward with a trial anyway.
So he went on and filed his own bill of information.
That's correct.
Notwithstanding the grand jury's failure to indict.
That is correct.
All right. So Mr. Perilou came out after that hearing in which Judge Rick said there's no probable cause to continue on with the trial. And I believe just about everybody remembers the infamous quote that Mr. Perilou made then was that he'd be appealing this to the First Circuit Court of Appeals, and I quote, just because they wear a black robe doesn't mean they know everything.
Which is most offensive, you know.
But once again, and to my knowledge, in fact, I can go out on a limb, I'm fairly certain of this, I've yet to see an attorney challenge the rights and privileges that the legislature granted to the Inspector General's office. I'll add just a bit of specificity, and correct me if I'm wrong, on exactly what the judge ruled on. First of all, there was Mr. McClendon outlined that you need to have a 48-hour period for a judge to render a decision with regard to subpoenas.
Right.
And yeah, exactly. And the Inspector General's office has kind of viewed it. We've never done that. Yeah, it says that in the statute, but we've just never bothered with it.
A judge is supposed to, according to the statute, render a decision as to the validity of that search warrant. In my case, they, for the search warrant for my home, they had no jurisdiction to begin with. But with regard to my medical records and the subpoena power of my medical records, it was a violation of HIPAA. I mean, according to the federal statutes and any state statute with regard to a case such as mine, Ms. Webb was supposed to and should have gone to the extremes and gotten a search warrant for my medical records to justify her seizing my records. But she didn't. However, in the preliminary exam, as you well know, she literally read every medical procedure I had had over the course of the 18 months that I worked for the parish. Duplication. There's no necessity for an Office of Inspector General unless you're investigating state employees who might be mishandling or misusing their office or power. I mean, if they want to investigate anyone, they should investigate those within the general administration who may have done things wrong, which is why they were created. But to go outside and investigate a private citizen, such as myself, and a private company, and to use it, the excuse and say, well, we're investigating you because you worked under GOSEP. Well, why is it then, which I go back to what I said earlier, out of 280 contractors who worked on the project, you target the only guy who blew the whistle? Yeah. Not one document, not one shred of evidence came off of any computer seized out of the 17 terabytes of information seized from my home.
17 terabytes?
17 terabytes. Right? You seized 42 computers and 17 terabytes of information. Not one document, not one piece of paper, not one email, nothing was presented in the probable cause hearing from anything that they received from my residence. And I would think if you had a case, it would have all been laying there in front of you, and you would have seized that opportunity to say this is what he did wrong. Obviously, this was just another tactic to intimidate a federal witness, and they failed, and they're going to fail again.
Well, and also, correct me if I'm wrong, but during that hearing referencing Judge Ricks, an attorney for GOSEP was placed on the stand.
Yeah, Ben White.
Yeah, and he was asked. It was a covered agency, and he said, I don't know. And he was also asked if if you had submitted billings directly to
Right.
GoShep,
Right.
would it have been appropriate for GoShep to pay them? And he said, no, in fact, I think it would have been quite improper.
Right.
All of which is to lay the foundation for the fact that Livingston Parish is not a covered agency.
Correct.
Therefore, denying the jurisdiction for Stephen Street to have even been in there in the first place.